And we happen to just have the first one. Oh, sorry. Got it. Okay. Yeah, so we just had our first September session this week and went really well, really emphasizing the relevance and engagement, student engagement and buy-in, and the importance of that. During these meetings, we cover a lot of ground with regards to the application process and address a number of time-sensitive topics. And obviously, due to the relevance and importance of these sessions, attendance for your child is mandatory. In the September session, we focused on how to keep organized throughout the application process, which is critical. We reviewed timelines, provided a number of resources with regards to researching various forms of scholarships. One example of which is the scholarship report that Matt Fox posts, and our guidance assistant, sorry, who I didn't mention, is Tanya Skiok, will post on the students' EDSB guidance site each month. Now, there's a number of different types of scholarships and databases and resources available for students. So we always encourage the students to talk to you at home, this weekend, next week or so, about scholarships, because the assumption on the part of the students is often that, no, my family's fine, I don't need to think about this. And it's typically around February or March, we have students in our doorways of our offices going, oh yeah, my parents want me to ask you, where can I find information about scholarships? And I'm there scratching my head going, I think we talked about this in September, but here we are. And at that point, a number of scholarship application deadlines have passed. So it's important to have that discussion. And obviously in some family situations, like, no, we're all good. And others, mom and dad, might say like, yeah, this could, we're good financially, but this can really help out. And there's families as well, where it's like, we really do need scholarship, as part of the equation moving forward. So definitely, have that discussion with your child, and then we're here to support moving forward in terms of continuing to point them in the right direction in terms of how to access scholarships, identifying which scholarships they meet the criteria for, and supporting them in the application process as well. In this week's session, we also really focus on the fact that you're in the game now. With regard to the upcoming application cycle, it's time to buckle up and move forward. At this point, you can see some students are like the deer caught in the headlights. They're anxious or feeling lost. This is normal. So I would say it's important that you do something about this. For example, some students like, I can't think about this right now. It's too much. It's too stressful. Well, it's here and you have to think about it. And we do acknowledge that, yes, this can be stressful. This is perhaps the biggest decision coming up at the end of this year that you will have made at this point in your life. So we are here as counselors to meet with your child one-to-one to really address their personal situation and to help give them greater clarity and direction. This is what we do, and we love what we do. So we really emphasize that to the students. Come set up an appointment. And likewise for yourselves. We never want you at any point throughout this year, wondering like, what's coming next? I'm not sure about this. I'm kind of confused with. Please send us an email, give us a call, and we'll set up a time to chat for sure. And to help answer your questions. So we also looked at the upcoming application cycle, and noting that many East Coast schools actually begin opening up their applications on October 15th, and that a lot of those schools have rolling admissions. So sometimes it's very useful to apply early on. And then we'll focus obviously more closely on this in our next guidance session in a few weeks' time. So in October, we start teaching the students basically how to take a deeper dive in terms of the programs that they're interested in. For example, how to access the academic undergraduate calendar on school websites to look at what would I be taking in first year? What my courses in second year look like? What electives does the school offer in that program I'm interested in? Because that can vary between school to school. How do they approach their curriculum? So you can study biology and have a different program, same content at different schools, whereas one school can be more hands-on, lab-based, and others more theoretical in approach. So very useful, for students to identify which programs really meet their interest, but also their learning styles. November is a big month in terms of submitting applications. We begin our Ontario applications in mid-November, once we receive the login PIN numbers from the Ontario University Application Center, which we refer to as UAC. And then, as I note, we begin mid-November. That's 2 months in advance of the deadline. So it allows students ample time to continue to add additional programs up to that deadline in on January 15th. It also provides students with oodles of time to work on and complete any supplements that may be required for a given program. For example, like personal statement writing, We can help them prep for if they have video interviews or in-person interviews, etc. So when we go through the Ontario applications, I create an instructional video. I set up a dummy account and I walk it through. And then we have the students in our guidance sessions put on their AirPods or their earplugs or whatnot, or earphones, sorry, and they can navigate through at their own pace. All right, following the steps, press pause, catch up to what Mr. Bailey was doing, press play, and so forth. And this is a very, very effective way to do this. And we do this for Ontario because there's more to the application. And we have pretty much all of our students applying to Ontario, regardless if they're applying also to the US, UK, Australia, and so forth. So yeah, students will also be applying during the month of November to international programs. So also, I should mention, out of province, coast to coast Canadian schools, US, UK, Australia, Europe, Hong Kong. And with the students applying to international schools, they've worked closely with their counselors leading up to the point of application, as those applications tend to be a lot more work intensive on the part of the student. And we right now, for example, are working with students applying to the US and certain UK programs in the month of September, with earlier deadlines looming. And then finally, in December, we focus on supporting students with those writing supplements where applicable. You know, we will have optional sessions as well on how to write a personal statement, how to prepare for an interview, and help continue to support the students as they navigate next steps in their applications. Yeah, so here, we'll also mention, like, have a plan for necessary tests, SAT, ACT, English proficiency testing, TOEFL, IELTS, where applicable, once again. So we really start connecting with students individually in terms of where that applies. And likewise, as we said, working with students, building up to that November timeline for application, working on the process involved and how do they request letters of recommendation from their teachers, and preparing and working on their personal statement. Okay, so I'll turn it over to, I believe, Mrs. Elson. Next slide.
Thanks, Ty. I'm going to share with you over the next few slides a few events that we have coming up here at TCS, but also virtually. But just to bring to your attention, and maybe a reminder to our grade 12 students, we do have 2 fairs coming up. So we'll have representatives from universities, college, and gap year opportunities that will come during our flex period on Friday, October 27th, and Friday, November 24th. And then we're also excited to be getting back to our campus visits. So on Monday, October 16th, all grade 12 students will be participating in a day trip to either McMaster, Carleton, Ottawa, the University of Guelph, and the University of Toronto, the Scarborough, Mississauga campuses. Another reminder for the students is through EDSB on the right-hand side in their calendar is whenever we have university, college, or gap year options of representatives coming to speak virtually, we will post that within EDSB, and they do have permission. Sometimes they run at night or throughout the day where they can catch in on their spare, but just information sharing about specific programs, universities, a chance for them to ask questions and learn more about schools that they might be interested in. And our guidance folder on EDSB is also accessible to you. We do our best to post everything guidance. So from scholarships, those events coming up, signups, university fairs, important information, deadlines, opportunities for summer or throughout the school year, kind of a one-stop shop for all you need to know guidance. And we also wanted to bring to your attention the Ontario Universities Fair. So this will happen on October 21st and 22nd. It's from 10 till 5 p.m. at the Toronto Convention Centre. And that's when all Ontario universities will come in an opportunity to check in with someone in person. And they also run some regional fairs. So those will happen between September 25th and the week of November 13th, just in kind of smaller pods all around Ontario to learn more information about Ontario universities. They have also continued for those of you that are away, some virtual dates as well. So September 26th and November 22nd are also dates to keep in mind to learn some more information about opportunities within Ontario. And those are from 5 till 7. I feel like I've thrown a lot of dates at you. Matt Fox will be sharing this PowerPoint after, so you'll have access to all the slides and the links in here to learn more information about those upcoming events. And with that, I think I am passing it over to you, Matt.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Lisa. So just a reminder, like, thank you as parents. You're an important part, obviously, in this conversation that we continue to have. Most or all of this information we are sharing with your children, and we like to encourage them to be in the driver's seat and pushing this forward. But we also think it's important to keep you guys in the loop with some of these dates and some prompts that you might give them. As well as, if you noticed, we are going to start a newsletter at the start of every month that's geared towards both grade 12 parents, but also all parents of students here, just with an update from guidance. So you can watch for some of these reminders and dates there as well. So some of the important application timelines that might be coming up, and you might have some anxious or stressed children in your ears lately if they're thinking about applying to the Oxford, Cambridge direct entry med programs, and also some US early decision and early action applications. So we're kind of knees deep with the students right now when it comes to getting those ready, getting their rec letters ready, firming up some of those applications to go off. Mid-October is kind of the earliest deadline that some of them have. November 1st is another one, and November 15th is another one. So those are some of the really upcoming application timelines that some of your children might be looking at. In November is once we'll get the OUAC numbers for our students, and then they'll actually be able to go on and start looking to applying to some of the Ontario programs. The Ontario deadline isn't until January, but like was mentioned earlier, we like to get some of those applications out sooner in case any schools have some sort of early applications that are available. And then just for our peace of mind, we like to get students heading into the Christmas break with those applications done. So it's well in advance of that kind of mid-January deadline for Ontario. Once we do return in January, we will be following up with students just to make sure that they've hit their US college deadlines, the Ivy School of Business, the Ontario ones, the UK is mid-January as well, and then help support them with out-of-province applications as well. Once they've applied, they're not rid of us yet. So we continue doing some sessions with them once a month, tracking those applications. And it's really important. They're going to get an enormous amount of emails from each university that they've applied to, and each university will have a different kind of portal to log into. So they'll get a different username and a different password kind of for each application that they've got. It gets very overwhelming. So we've given them some strategies in terms of keeping their email organized, but we will also continue to support them throughout the winter in checking their emails regularly and making sure that they don't miss dates. So those could be supplementary package dates. They could be residence, like applying for residence dates, scholarship dates. So again, we do everything we can to encourage them and support them to check those emails. But it is overwhelming. So just throwing that on your radar that your support is helpful as well. What else? We will be talking to them about transitions. As guidance counselors, our job is cool because we get to usher and welcome them in grade 9, and we get to help them with their grade 12 transition off to post-secondary. So that's an important part of our program as well, and we will be meeting with students to discuss that. Lots of conversations and questions usually about when marks are getting sent to universities. So we will do an initial upload in November. Rest assured, especially for Ontario schools, that those November marks the universities are checking them out and maybe offering some early offers based on them, but they're certainly not denying any students based on those November marks. So no need to feel too anxious about what's happening in November. We will do another upload mid-year in February. So that's kind of the halfway point in the year when marks should be more stable and reflective of your child's success in their class. And then there will be one more upload after that, kind of closer to April or May. These are just some rough guidelines in terms of when students might hear from some of these universities. So you'll see in the UK, typically we'll hear by early May. From Ontario, typically students will hear from the last week of May. And again, lots of anxiousness sometimes around campus when some students are hearing that they've been accepted and some students aren't. Please reassure your child it's really, really normal for different schools to have different schedules in terms of when they're sending out those offers. And to be honest, sometimes our most competitive programs tend to be the ones that offer or give offers later just because they're looking for more data. So please, you can direct your children back to their guidance counselor for some safety and some reassurance there. But of course, we can appreciate that it can be a bit of a stressful time for students, especially once the chatter starts that some offers have started to come in. And then we get to speech day, which is super exciting that we get to celebrate your children and all their hard work over their time here at TCS, regardless of what their next step and path that they choose to take there. So Mr. Brooks, I think it's over to you, buddy.
All right, hello. Yeah, so just want to look over just the roles of students and then guidance counselors, and then you as the parents, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. So not going to go over all this, but I think this is kind of the big framing thing here. I mean, Mr. Bailey was alluding to, it's a stressful process. With that being said, I think our students are well poised for this application cycle. Actually most, if not all students have at least 5 programs and 5 schools researched. I know I was helping someone, a friend of ours outside of the school, and their child had no kind of schools researched at this point in time, and that kind of made it quite frantic, just making sure that they were well placed in like right courses and things like that. So I think they're in a good place. They're set up for success right now, and I'm just trying to encourage with our students just to find joy in this. I think one of the big things too, though, that kind of remains here is just to continue to do research. So even though, a lot of our students have done research on, 5, 6, 7, 8 schools, we are really encouraging them just to load up their research document. They all are working out of a tracking document, which they can share with you. It's just a simple Google sheet. We've been working on it since grade 11. We want to see that plugged up with research. And one of the unique things about that document is we all have access to their documents as guidance counselors. And sometimes I'll be working with a student and then I'll think of another student. I'm like, oh, like this program would actually be a perfect fit. And I can pop into their document and I can add it in and give them a little notice that I added to their document. So please, if you haven't had a chance, take a look at that. Unfortunately, the student needs to share that with you. They have like the rights of ownership for the document. We don't, but that is a great tool just for kind of conversations. That's one of the things we've been stressing with them, is to discuss these things with you, just so that there are no surprises in terms of potentially what you're thinking versus potentially what they are thinking. As Mr. Bailey alluded to, said directly, we are having a regular grade 12 guidance sessions at minimum on a monthly session. And then we're also going to be having, as they're relevant, drop-in seminars. We're going to do one on applying to Dalhousie. We're going to do one on applying to Canadian programs with a supplement. We've got some kind of curriculum that we work through to help students write their supplemental essays. With that being said, though, we're really encouraging students to meet with us one-to-one. We will from time to time pull your child in for a meeting. However, students are free to make meetings, as long as it's not during class time. They can make meetings at any time. So we are also encouraging that. And we really are, this is a transition period from grade 12 moving into university, and we need them to kind of be in the driver's seat and to start to engage the process, because their experience next year in university or post-secondary college, they're going to be in the driver's seat altogether. And so we want to kind of scaffold that sort of structure this year. Next slide, please. So in terms of our role as guidance counselors, we're here to be a sounding board for your child. And in so doing, as we learn more about your child, and we're trying to kind of figure out, using the knowledge that we've cultivated and the research that we've done and the schools that we've visited over many years, we're trying to kind of make connections to find places and programs where your child can flourish. And so we're a resource, we're a guide, we're there to help. And it's important to know too, I just want to be very clear, I like this language, you're bringing them to the door, but universities decide. We don't decide for universities, but what we can do is help bring your child to the door of that university to kind of ask whether they would take them, and to help them kind of see, what's needed to get into those particular programs. Just the ups and downs of the year, just broadly speaking, as a guidance counselor, if your child is struggling, we are here for them, as is their advisor, as is their head of house. And then transitioning through, once they start to kind of accept these offers and start to think about where they're going to go, we're also here to help them address those kind of transitional issues as well. And then next slide, please. Yeah, so just in terms of the role of the parent, I would just encourage you to we're trying to facilitate this just through our monthly newsletter, just kind of giving relevant, timely guiding questions just for conversations. I think for this, it's not my job to tell you what to do as a parent. What what you need to do and what is the right thing. But if just some things that I would just encourage would just be to try and encourage these young people to follow their natural strengths and passions and interests, and just to give them opportunities to identify those, just like we're trying to do that as well. I think it's incredibly powerful where that's done on the home front as well. I think really important as well, what we're finding is visiting post-secondary institutions. I don't think there's any rush to do this at the moment, but I have found, just historically, I've been doing this for over a decade, and what I have found is that when students are actually able to set foot to a campus, that can really help with the decision-making process, at least, where there's just like an almost undefinable, indiscernible sense that this school is for them or not for them. And sometimes students really only get a chance to be made aware of that when they're actually on the campus physically themselves. The other thing that can be done was pointed out earlier, there are kind of virtual visits and webinars. And I would be those are things that you can join as well. They are open to parents, and they are things that you can do with your son or daughter as well. Another thing too, just really important, just discussing finances for post-secondary education. I'm not going to belabor that point, but it's just really important. I know one of the classic things that I talk about is there's some students thinking about the United States and thinking about Canadian schools. And for Canadian citizens, you're looking at an average tuition of maybe $9,000 in Canada and $70,000 US for the US. So I've been kind of stressing to students, if that's what you're thinking about, have those conversations now, just to make sure everyone is on the same page. In terms of providing credit card information, I mean, I've got 3 kids. At the thought of me while they're younger, the thought of me giving them my credit card information, I mean, I've got cold sweats right now just thinking about that. But there is a period in time where they will need that, just when it comes to applying, especially to Ontario, but also to the US. So if you're going to do that with them yourself, fine. But there will be a couple moments in the application cycle where they would need to do that. And that is it for me. So I think right now we're going to just open it up for questions. And if they're easy ones, I'll try and answer them. And if they're hard ones, Ty Bailey will try and answer them. Oh, and I think you can unmute yourself for a question. You can also, if you don't feel comfortable saying your question out loud, you can throw it into the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat as well.
I think I see a hand up from Suzanne here.
Okay, I'll just answer the one in the chat, and then Suzanne, I think you can unmute yourself and ask your question. But I'll answer in the chat. What are some of the options provided for with gap year? Okay, yeah. So I would say a couple things there. If you reach out to Melanie, if you reach out to Emerson's guidance counselor, we can send off some ideas. Oh, host is not allowing to unmute. Okay. maybe Matt, you can take a look at that, and I'll finish up with this question about gap year. Suzanne, in a worst case scenario, maybe just throw your question into the chat, and we can go from there, just in case we can't fix it in time. So Melanie, I think in terms of the gap year, your guidance counselor will be able to give out some options. I think there's like kind of two ideas here, just for gap years. There's kind of like set programs where I know there's a great program based in Ottawa. I forget the name of it, but I'm sure we can follow up with you about this if you're interested in it. Students live in Ottawa for a year, and they go through kind of a work term and then like a class term. And it's really, really focused on just providing opportunities for students to kind of stress test ideas that they have about careers. There's a whole bunch of ones, even just through the Canadian government, about pursuing overseas opportunities. We have access to that. But then the third option too is just kind of helping students to kind of create their own gap year that's uniquely tailored to their own situation. Students might backpack in Europe for part of the year. And then they may do some sort of quasi internships, or at least kind of volunteer work in kind of select careers that they think that they may be interested in. And sometimes we've actually leveraged the alumni department of the school to kind of help connect students. If they hadn't, I remember I had a student interested in industrial design, and we were able to connect that student with a TCS grad who either worked for or owned an industrial design firm. So that would be what I would say. But kind of the Coles notes, I would just say reach out to the guidance counselor. I can answer the question with the list for the application deadline for certain universities. I think, well, we did share that kind of list. We share that broad list. I think one of the complicating factors here is that there are kind of one-offs. So just to give an example, typically US early decision is November 1st, but early action for some select schools is October 15th for the US. And that always changes. So we're not actually able to kind of collect that in a neat and tidy way. And so really one of the things that we have stressed and done with students, they have a university research document. In that document, there is a line where it has kind of deadlines for the application and for the supplement. And, we've encouraged students, and we will continue to encourage them to kind of update that, just in case, one school modifies their application deadline. Broadly speaking, though, we like to have students apply well in advance of the deadlines, just to make sure that nothing is missed. Working with teenagers, sometimes things are missed, but we do try and make sure that doesn't happen as much as possible. I know one of the challenges of this sort of environment with the application structures is, their students are really at a point now where the universities are not communicating with us, and they're not communicating with you even as a parent. They want to deal with that student directly. I think if you did have a question, Matt was just saying that in the chat that you could unmute yourself and ask a question. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, this is Suzanne Mills. I'm Olivia's mother. I have two questions. My first question is kind of is a minor one. Do any of the universities have pre-organized tours that we can join on preset dates that you're aware of? And my second question is there a list, if Olivia wants to apply to St. FX for this program and she knows what her average is there a guideline on whether she would be more likely or not likely to be accepted based on her grades? And so it makes sense to apply there, or perhaps look at a different university.
Yeah, good questions. I'll start with the last one. So yeah, schools like St. FX is a good example of that. St. FX will post their kind of recommended historical averages So I believe it's about like an 80% or a 75% for St. FX, depending on the program. There are some programs that would be higher. We have noticed a trend where universities are kind of hedging that a bit, just kind of saying that this is historical data and it's kind of based upon also the set of students that is applying that year. One of the reasons why students or schools are saying that is because some particular schools like Dalhousie experienced a surge of interest over the past couple of years. We're not quite sure why that is. It may be COVID related and just the unique policies that they had in navigating that. So there is no kind of like guarantee with that, but I would say historically speaking, for a school like St. FX, the marks there that they're posting are broadly are largely safe. And in the students' research document, there's actually all that research should be in there, including the grades. Ontario universities are quite good at posting those averages. And typically what I would say, the more competitive the program, the less committal the school is to providing a particular average. And part of that is because some of the more competitive programs are going to be reliant upon a supplemental essay or a video interview or a resume. And that kind of subjective part of the application is given a significant weight in negotiating the admissions decision. It's not just the raw data of the grades. And yeah, sorry, if you don't mind repeating your first question. So I turned 40 this year, so I can't.
I can answer that.
Okay.
No problem. Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
Good, Billy, thank you.
Good,
Okay,
good. So
sorry.
yeah, for booking campus tours, you just go onto the school website, and there'll be a link within any post-secondary institution's website in terms of when they offer campus tours. So there'll be group tours. A lot of schools will typically have them on Saturdays. In addition to that, there'll be open houses as well as fall preview days, if you will, sort of different terminology for an open house, where you can get a more extensive sort of look, at the science labs and, sports games on the go and whatnot, to get a more comprehensive look at the school. But definitely they're structured in every school. That's part of their marketing, if you will, and so forth. You'll have no problem finding and arranging campus tours.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I see a question in the chat about a limit of the number of universities someone can apply to, and is there a recommended number? So
Yeah,
just
I answered that. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry,
did
Matt, you want to?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, if you answered it, I don't need to repeat it. I was just going to say that through OUAC in Ontario, you get a minimum of 3, but you can add on a university after that. But I would just say from my experience, the more you add, sometimes it can add a little bit of confusion for the student. If they all of a sudden have 8 offers, it can be a bit overwhelming then to try to narrow down what school. So sorry, again, if this is repeated information, but I would encourage your child to kind of work with their counselor in terms of firming up a list that they are really excited about. And we can work with them to find schools that are, kind of safe, but also in reach and kind of support that process.
So as long as every application counts, that students just aren't throwing programs and the names of schools in their application where they have no interest, they know nothing about the school, and it becomes a game. Like one year, many years ago, I had a student apply to like 28 different programs, half of which they couldn't even tell me where the school was. And they just wanted to see how many offers. And I said, that's not right. Like that's excessive. Let's really pare that number down so that each school, each program you're applying to is a potential winner in your eyes. Not just there for the sake to see if you can get an offer. So that's really important in terms of shaping that application list, is whether it's I call it like a slam dunk school where you far exceed the cutoffs and whatnot. It still has to be a school that you would see yourself being happy at, not just that's my backup end of the world choice. Not a good way to approach things. But typically, in my experience, 5, 6 to 6 to 8 is common, where these are all again potential winners for a student that they're very interested in.
So from a devil's advocate standpoint, if your child applies to 6 universities and doesn't get accepted to any of the 6 and doesn't find out about that until May, what's the navigation from that point?
Well, first of all, I see part of our role as guidance counselors to ensure that never happens. So if I have a student with a 75 average only applying to schools with a 90 cutoff, there's a disconnect, and we've got to bring them in the office, and we've got to go back to square one and rejig that plan, because you want to have options in there, and we ensure that all of our students are in that situation heading in to that decision making cycle in terms of component of the admissions process. Worst case scenario, not that we've experienced this, but if someone ends up empty in May, you can still apply. And this is little known fact, is that even though a deadline passes for UAC, most competitive programs will close, and that so many applications will come in, they'll max out. But there will always be a number of programs still accepting applications. And I've had a student apply many years ago now in June, and it was sort of just a change in direction, and they hadn't talked or thought about the school, and they applied to a school shortly before speech day and got an offer the next day because they were still taking applications. Now, obviously, with our timeline and the work the kids are doing, we want to minimize the chances of that student getting to that point late in the game. But really, it comes down to now, in terms of doing the research, is to make sure all bases are covered and that they're going to have multiple options on the table moving forward. Yeah.
And the only thing I might add there too is that we encourage all of our students to reach out to the universities or colleges themselves. There are really great admissions contact lists and admissions officers that work for these schools that are happy to engage with students. So if a student has a question about, what is a competitive average to gain entry into your program, what are you looking for in the supplementary materials, that sort of thing, it's definitely a great sign of initiative if your child reaches out to the specific schools and asks some of those questions to feel confident about the schools that they're choosing.
If nobody else has any questions, I have lots. If my child applies for a scholarship, which I would love for her to do, if she applies for a scholarship, does that have any influence on her application being accepted? Does the school look at that as, oh, their parents may not be able to afford second year and third year?
No. No, as far as I know, it wouldn't. No. I mean, the majority of students, I think, in Ontario would be applying for OSAP, like the Ontario Student Assistance Program, and schools aren't, as far as I know, schools aren't really aware of that when it comes to their decision making. I think it's a little more complicated when it comes to the US. I'm just referring to Canadian schools. I'm assuming this is a Canadian based question, a little different with the US.
Additionally, most of these scholarships are external to the schools themselves that your child will be applying for. So the universities will often offer automatic scholarships just based on your average that you're coming in with. But that scholarship report that was mentioned earlier, those are all external to the schools themselves. And so they wouldn't even really be privy to any of that information. But feel free to keep firing us your questions.
There's quite a few questions in the chat. How much is an application fee?
Oh, I answered that one. It's about it's $50 per program choice. I think some of the questions that are asked in the chat, there's like a little, maybe everyone can't see it. There's like a little button. I just replied directly to them. Yeah, so $50, just in case you can't see it, it's about $50 per program choice for schools in Ontario. I know there was another question about what happens when a student has an interview scheduled. Are they excused from the interview? Certainly we would excuse, a student from class, assuming it wasn't a test, even if it was a test, actually, if it was an important interview, we would certainly excuse them. Most of the interviews, though, when I say interviews, for Canadian schools, it's not a live interview. It's a pre-recorded interview. So a lot of schools, and not a lot of schools, I'd say about 4 schools are using this company, the Kira Talent Agency. And we actually use that for hiring. So I know when I was hired here, like I think I did my interview at like midnight. It doesn't matter when you do it. It's just once you start it, you can't stop it. And, you've only got 2 minutes to answer this question, 2 minutes to answer this question, and things like that. Just as an encouragement too, like we do leverage that software for students that do have interviews. We do provide them opportunities to practice on the same software that we use for hiring that schools like University of British Columbia, University of Toronto, and Waterloo are using.
You've made reference a couple times to the most competitive, like the competitive programs. What are those? Which programs are competitive?
Depends on which subject area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I could highlight individual programs, but I think broadly, it really is going to vary school by school. To be honest with you, but I would say in Ontario, like some of the commerce and engineering programs would be pretty competitive, and some of the specialized
Health science programs. Yeah.
Also, to be honest with you, like fine arts programs, some of the fine arts programs that have like a portfolio or an audition would be quite competitive as well. I mean, typically, I think if there's a concern about a program kind of being competitive, I'd have your child kind of talk to their guidance counselor about it. We can usually suss out whether they're competitive or not as competitive. But typically the flag for me would be the weight given to a supplement and whether they even have a supplement. Still, just to be fair, the majority of programs in Canada do not have a supplement, like where there's like an essay or anything like that. Most of the programs are actually still grades only, but some of them are not. And you can usually see too, because if a child is doing the research on it, you might find that there's like only 40 seats in the program or 100 seats in the program, and other programs may have 4,000 seats. So yeah, it's usually a tell as well. But we help out with all that, like.
Yeah. And as Keith was saying, anytime there's a supplement involved, you now have that layer of subjectivity in the admissions decision-making process. So that can muddy the water somewhat, because it's not like a guaranteed, even based on marks. And that's more reflective of a US model and sort of a holistic admissions policy, which sort of seems to be trickling in into Canada with time. But yeah, it's gonna be tough to say in programs like that.
And sorry, just one more point on that. In the chat, I dropped a link that is great for researching. We send it off to all of our students for Ontario universities and Ontario colleges. However, I just am noticing that the link I put for Ontario colleges leads you directly to engineering and tech programs, but you can find other programs there. And if you're curious about what some of their competitive averages are and what schools need supplements and things like that, those would be great links to go to.
Hi, I have a question. Malika Taylor, Sienna's mom here. What are the differences between the University of Toronto campuses? I see the upcoming tour is touring a Mississauga campus, a Scarborough campus. Can you talk a little bit about the differences, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I can talk about that. I think that's I would say two big differences up front. I think for most students at University of Toronto, they're going to be from Toronto. And it's a big commuter school, so lots of residents of Toronto attend those schools. So those campuses kind of serve the different geographical locations of Toronto. So the Scarborough campus serves the East End, the Mississauga campus serves the West End, and then the downtown campus serves the downtown core of Toronto. So I think that'd be the first difference. The second difference would just be, I think, different programs as well. So I know I couldn't tell you off the top of my head for University of Toronto Scarborough, but I believe there's like a difference in their computer science program. So I've actually had students historically, a couple in particular coming to mind, where they actually wanted the University of Toronto Scarborough campus over the downtown campus. And then, downtown campus will have Rotman Commerce, which Mississauga wouldn't have, but Scarborough wouldn't have either. It's just the downtown campus.
They have their program for business as management, and then as opposed to Rotman Commerce. So yeah.
So they're just little different. So typically the students will actually be able to kind of identify that in the research, in terms of what they want. I have had some students kind of opt more for a Mississauga campus, just because they actually just liked the campus and it was a smaller feel, and you're still graduating with the University of Toronto degree. But I mean, for a lot of students that want University of Toronto, they want to be in downtown Toronto. And I mean, you're not going to get that at University of Toronto Scarborough campus or Mississauga. Although I will say, if you do play on University of Toronto sports teams, like I know we've had a number of students play baseball for University of Toronto. They all practice at University of Toronto Scarborough campus. So there is some kind of cross-pollination between the campuses as well.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay. All right, I guess at this point we can sign off and say thank you everybody for joining us this morning, and please do reach out with more questions, as we're sure you'll have more with time as we navigate through the process. And as always, we're happy to help. All right, thank you.